My name is Tessa, and this is my weekly costume progress video for the week of May 9th through May 15th. In this video, I'll talk about the work I've done on my Attolia costume and my Mr. Knight costume. I've recently started a new part of the Attolia costume. Because where I'll be living in October gets fairly cold around Halloween, I was a little worried about the fact that the dress itself is sleeveless and also the fabric is fairly thin. So I decided to design a cloak, which I will be using the gold velvet that I used for the dragon dress, because I happen to have a bunch of it lying around. And then I also wanted it to be fur-lined, so this week I went out and grabbed this fake fur. It's kind of an off-white, and it has an interesting texture to it that I like, because it doesn't look so boring. The fur itself is actually fairly short, which I really like because it won't be overwhelming within the cloak. And it'll go about halfway down the cloak, only to about the bottom of my arms. So it won't be fully lined, but it will be mostly lined. And what I'm planning is that where the fake fur is tacked onto the velvet, along the shoulders on the outside, that will be done using gold beads. And in fact, the same gold beads that I used here for the embroidery on the dress itself. So it'll just sort of trail down with this gold shimmery pattern, which you can kind of see right in here in the sketch that I just quickly made of it. And I think that'll look really cool. I'm taking a break from the pants to work on the hat, since that's a pretty easy project that I don't think is going to take a ton of time, though fingers crossed. I've already gone ahead and prepped the lights in that I've gone in and attached a hook from a hook and eye to help keep the battery pack in place. And then I've also gone ahead and threaded it so that the string of the actual lights is on the outside, going out through a small hole in the inner ribbon of the hat. I might sew this stuff down. I'm going to have to test out how that works and see if I can still remove the pack if this is secured. And depending on how well the battery pack stays in place, I might also have to add in this, which is a little pocket I've sewn out of the lining fabric for the main suit. But I'm hoping that just the hook will keep it in place well enough. Here you can see me putting the lights on the hat and securing them in place. I didn't really go with any specific pattern for the lights. I just went with what looked right and what I could do based on the space between the lights. And it took a lot longer than I was anticipating, especially since I had to sew down all of the wires as I went, but I'm pretty happy with the result. As you can see here, I now have all of the lights sewn onto the hat, and that's what it looks like when it's on. There are lights on the brim as well, so it's completely sewn together. It's just a really simple stitch going over the wire just to keep everything in place. And I did go in on the inside and attach an elastic thing to hold this in place, which was a real pain to get in there. But it also is a little frustrating because, and I don't know if this can show up on camera, but the two places where I sewed it are getting like bent inwards. Yeah, you can't really see it, but it's there, trust me. So I'm just kind of hoping that the weight of the battery pack will be more supported by the wig when the hat is actually on, And I'm hoping that I can kind of help to cheese it with the velvet when I get that put on as well. So the next step is to cover this with the real fabric. Putting the fabric on the hat was tricky. I was hoping I would just be able to smooth it in place, but obviously if you put a two-dimensional piece of fabric on a three-dimensional object, you're going to run into issues, which of course I did. I ended up having to cut seams down the side of the hat, which you can't really see in this video because I didn't record that part, but I ended up sewing those. First I tried gluing them, and that just didn't work, so I ended up coming up with a way to sew them in place so that they would be secure, but so that the stitches wouldn't be visible. And because there was a lot of trial and error, that part took a lot of time. So here is the fully completed hat. The lights are all on, and all of the velvet has been put on, including on the inside so that it's nice and finished, which is a little hard to see on camera because the fabric is so dark. And it does turn on, which I can show there. And it actually looks really good. I'm really happy with it. It did take a lot longer than I thought it would, but I'm really pleased with the way it came out, and I'm glad I took the extra time to really make it perfect. So one of the things I learned when I was working on the dragon dress ball gown is that velvet really likes to slide when you try to put it into a seam. And so my biggest tip for working with it is to hand baste everything. Every single seam, every single dart, anything that you're going to have to sew that isn't just one layer of fabric, because it will slip, it will go all sorts of different places, and pins just aren't enough. It just won't hold it in place properly. But sewing it together works pretty well. Here you can see me making the star layout for one of the pant sides. There are 50 lights per pant leg, so I had to make sure that everything was measured out so that I would have an equal number of sides so that there wouldn't be any weird gaps or anything like that. And that ended up being pretty tricky. At first I tried just using the lights themselves as the measurement, but I ended up realizing that I should just use a tape measure, which is much more easy to control than the lights. So I've been doing some work on the pants, and as you can see, I have a bunch of the lights in. It's a little bit wrinkly, which is frustrating, and I don't really know how to fix that. So I'm probably going to have to do some experimentation to see if I can get it to be a little smoother. But for the most part, I'm pretty happy with how it's going. For the next week, I hope to continue making progress on the embroidery for the Attolia costume. I'm about a third of the way done with the tunic, so I'm really hoping to get that done maybe sometime in the next 2 weeks, probably not this week. For the Mr. Knight costume, I'd really like to get the pants completed, or at least get the lights put in completely, which is proving to take more time than I thought it would. Other than that, I'd like to see if I could test the pattern for the jacket for the Mr. Knight costume, though we'll see if I get to that. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this, you can check out my official portfolio at eds-costumes.com, or you can check out my Tumblr, where I also post updates. I also do a weekly costume video on my YouTube, so if you want to know when one of those comes out, you should subscribe and hit the notification bell. Thank you so much.